Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just going to put this thought in your head for just a moment.
I don't want to get on George.
Think about a loving grandfather. And as all loving
There's
grandfathers
a computer up there,
desire,
but it's shut. You can just put your stuff.
they
on
would
top of
like
it.
to be able to make your life better
Yeah, well, I had
on
a
the
couple
journey
over
that
there.
you're about to embark upon. They want to make sure that you are full of hope and truth and the best rules for the road. And that loving grandfather will impart this to you, asking nothing, and from the fullness of their heart and from the very soul of their being. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud to bring back out of retirement for you the Dean of Ufology, the Dean, Bob Dean.
My good friend. I guess I can lay this on top of there, huh?
Yeah.
These are my notes. I got 4 hours of here. And we're sure as hell not going to get through all of it. As I was working my way up the stairs back here, it dawned on me that, you know, incarnating on this planet can sometimes be a royal pain in the ass.
Speak up, Robert, please.
I keep thinking they're going to call me back to the factory for some retooling and some major parts replacement. And I've prepared a list of the major parts I want replaced. And there's an old friend in the audience, and I know damn well what he's thinking. And yes, that is at the top of my list. I really don't know where to begin, honestly. I just must say a few words here at the beginning. Why I'm here. Because I went into seclusion for a time. 5.5 years ago, I spoke at the Bay Area Conference in San Jose. And I said at that time that that presentation was my last and final public presentation. And I want you to understand why I did that. I was so fed up with so much that had happened over the years. I'm afraid I had learned too much. I'm afraid I had learned too much, and I had seen too much. I've been around a while. A week from tomorrow, I celebrate 80 years. And I have been prone to whine and complain and grumble and carry on a few times, you know, because the years take their toll. And every time I start whining and complaining, I look at Wendell Stevens, who celebrated 86 last month. So when I see Wendell, and he's farting around, pretty vigorous old coot, I shut up because, you know, I have no idea where I'm going to be around another 6, but I take my hat off to Wendell. Not only is he a dear friend, but he's a bit of a hero in my book. But I wanted you to know why I became a recluse for some time. I spoke at San Jose and I said, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. As I said, I'd seen too much, been too many places, and learned too much. And I'll be honest with you by telling you that some of the things I had learned brought my old worldview crumbling around my knees. You talk about the old paradigm and the idea that many people aren't ready for the new paradigm. Well, I wasn't ready when I first began this thing over 40 years ago. Serving in Europe at the time, SHAPE headquarters in Paris. And I got introduced to the reality of the phenomenon, and from that moment on, I could never put it down. I could never step away from it. The more I learned, the more I wanted to know, and the more I ended up knowing, the more shocked I became. And as I said, my old worldview collapsed. You talk about the word alienated. I was alienated completely because my old concepts were just down the toilet. And I walked away, went back to Phoenix, turned myself into a recluse, and as my son said, I was proceeding to commit suicide slowly. Smoked too many big cigars, drank too much good bourbon, drank too much strong coffee. As I said, I'm a heavy drug user, you know, really. Nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol probably is one of the things keeping me here. And I began to stew in my own juices, as it were. And a number of things began to happen. I began to do some very serious meditation. And under the suggestions and encouragement from a bunch of people like Joe McMonigal, who's another retired Army man, I began doing some remote viewing. And let me tell you, if you think that will not blow your old paradigm, you give it a try. I've even had a couple of out-of-body experiences. I call them excursions. And that'll shake you up. There's not a one of you in this audience that can't do that. Each and every one of you have that capability to remote view. And each and every one of you has the capability to step outside of your shell, which is what this is, and travel out there. I mean, there are no limits. You can go everywhere in this God's universe. And so a few things happened, transpired. I began to learn a little more. And then another couple of things happened. I came here a year ago, just as a guest, just to came and see how things were going. And a number of old friends came up to me and said, listen, you really got to get over this seclusion thing and come out and start talking to people again. And then I got a phone call from a senior naval officer in the Pentagon. And this senior naval officer called me up and said to me rather bluntly, listen, you old fart, get off your dead ass and get out there and start talking again about what you've learned. Well, needless to say, I was a little bit taken back by this. I mean, it was unseemly. I'm a senior citizen. I didn't figure I deserved that kind of commentary. I was taken aback momentarily. Because you see, this phone call from this senior naval officer in the Pentagon was from my son. And he's had the privilege over the years to call me an old fart and get away with it. And last year, a couple of the old boys in the Old Boys Network, like Wendell and Don Ware, two guys I deeply admire and respect, told me the same thing, you know. Stop sitting there stewing in my own juice. Come out here and talk and share with people. You've seen things, you've learned things that need to be told. And so a combination of all these things, the remote viewing, the out-of-body experiences, the blunt phone call from my kid, I'm here. And I'm going to stay out here in the public again as long as I'm around. Thank you very much. I've also had some encouragement from a couple of friends. I jokingly refer to friends in high places. Well, let me try to get here. I was in the gentleman's lounge just before I came up here, and I had a flash of illumination. Now, a lot of people have those flashes of illumination while they're in the shower, you know? I tend to have them when I visit the gentleman's lounge. I think it's the sound of running water that does it, you know? And at my age, I make a number of trips to the gentleman's lounge, and you would think I might be one of the most enlightened, illuminated people on the planet. But essentially, my illumination was this. What the hell are we doing here? Why do we come here every February? Why do we go up to San Jose at the Bay Area Conference every September? Why do we even bother doing what we do? And it hit me. It's because you people know how important this is. It's you people that, in my heart and my view, are the most important parts of this whole program. Each and every one of you. We come because we know that we're dealing with the greatest story in human history. I kid you not, it is simply the greatest story in human history. It's about us, the human race, this human species that we're all a part of. How did we come to be here? Where are we from? Why are we here? And where are we going? That's why it's so damned important. And we are at a transition moment in time. We are making a transition, and I call it a transcendent transformation into another species. And it's happening right this moment as you sit here in the audience. You're changing right in front of all of us. You're changing in every way. Your genetics, your genes are changing. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's a transformation that's underway, and when it's finished, if it ever finishes, which I doubt, you're going to be almost like gods because you have that potential. Long ago, an old friend of mine who I refer to continually as a dear old friend, a rabbi in Galilee said, "You are as gods. What I do, you can do, and even more." Well, take those words and put them in your heart and think about that. You are as gods. What he did, you can do, and even more. You're not there yet, but you're getting there. And this process is underway, and it cannot be stopped. It's fate. It's destiny. You're turning into a new species, and that transcendent transformation. That's why I love to look at the young people today. You know, you talk about these kids that are showing up. You look deep into their eyes and you see things. You see a depth of an understanding and an insight in those little eyes today. They're the new world. And you've laid the transformation for it. You've laid the groundwork for that. But that's why we're here. You know, you get a little depressed now and then. We all do. You say, most of the world couldn't care less what the hell we're doing here. Most of the people in the United States haven't a clue and aren't interested, and that may be so. But for those who do have a clue and for those who are interested, it's important that we keep coming here and speaking, sharing with each other, and listening to each other. Now I want to briefly touch upon something that's kind of current. I want to give you the definition of a word. And bear with me. There's a word that's being bandied about by people. It's called apocalypse. And I hate the misuse of that damned word. It's being used by a lot of people in different religious organizations. They're called the four horses of the apocalypse. You know, what is it? War, famine, and plague, and pestilence. Oh, we're in the end days. Oh God, we're doomed. Well, hell yes, we're doomed. There's not a one of you in this audience is going to be here 100 years from now. Everybody who died today on this planet, their world came to an end. But that's not what the word apocalypse means. The word simply means the revealing, the uncovering, and the disclosure. And you're smack ass in the middle of all of that. You're in the middle of a process of revealing and uncovering and disclosure. It's happening every day for those of you who pay attention. Now again, my old friend from Galilee said at one time, for those of you who have eyes to see, let him see. For those of you who have ears to hear, let him hear. And I would like to add one more thing to that. For those of you who have a mind to think with, for God's sake, think. That's what's the most important part of it. You have eyes, you're paying attention, you're listening, you're using your God-given mind to think. And let me tell you, there's a difference between mind and brain. Your brain will die when you do, when the body dies. Your mind will not die because your mind is a portion of your soul, which is immortal. And if you want me to say that again, when you step out of your body, you do your remote viewing, you have an out-of-body experience. One of the reasons I'm still here is I have learned in the last 5 years the reality of the immortality of the human soul. And if you don't think that shakes you up some, many of you may be way ahead of me on that. But the thing I've learned, I guess, the most powerful thing is that there is a God. Don't you ever doubt that. There is a supreme being. And you're all a part of that because there is a spark of that divinity flashing and burning in every one of you. It's known as your soul, your immortal soul. Now, I didn't come up here to make a sermon. I got so damn much to cover here. Oh, I wanted to talk to you briefly about we talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Hell, they've been riding since the beginning of human history. War, famine, plague, pestilence. What's new? Well, we've got 3 new horses. There are not 4, there are 7 horses in the apocalypse. There's a horse named selfishness and greed. It's riding out of a stables on Wall Street. And that's a damn dangerous horse to get in front of, let me tell you. There's another horse that's riding in the apocalypse, and that is known as religious intolerance. And that horse is riding out of different places, Rome, Mecca, New York, Washington, wherever. And that's a dangerous one. And then the last of the 7 horses that I refer to is a horse known as scientific materialism. And that horse rides out of places like Princeton, Harvard, Yale, all over the damn place. Scientific materialism has set the human soul and its development and its growth back more than almost any of the others, I think. You've got these guys who haven't the slightest idea that there is a spiritual component to the human being. And they won't mention it, they won't accept it, they won't agree to it because they can't measure it and weigh it in their laboratories. And boy, are they in for a surprise in this next few short years. Now, let's see, where were we? I wanted to talk about disclosure, one of those portions of the apocalypse. There are two men. I have a great respect and admiration for Stephen Greer. And I have another respect and admiration for a guy named Stephen Bassett, who've been promoting disclosure for some time. And bless their hearts, both of them have been saying, oh, any minute now, next week, oh, the new administration. You know, we get a new president in, Podesta, Panetta, some of the guys who worked for Slick Willie some years back are now in place, and we're going to have disclosure next week. Listen, I've been involved in this whole thing for 40 years, and I've been deeply involved in it for the last 20. And let me tell you, take it for what it's worth, in my view, there ain't going to be no disclosure. Not like they expect. They expect the government to someday have a news conference and stand up and say, hey, we got a little surprise for you. Guess what? We've been keeping it from you. We're sorry about that, but it was for your own good, you know. You guys weren't ready for this. You probably couldn't handle it. So, but now we're going to tell you, oh yes, aliens are here. They've been here for quite a while. They're all over the place. Well, they are indeed all over the damn place. But you're not going to get a government disclosure because that's not how government works. First of all, they're a bunch of nitwits in some cases. They're not capable of giving you a disclosure and doing it in a sensible, thoughtful, caring way. For a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that they don't want to admit to you they've been lying to you for over 60 years. And then the other thing is that they are really a little bit uncertain and frightened themselves because the true scope of their awareness and what they know still has them in a state of shock. Because they can't come out and tell you what, it's like my analogy of the Pandora's box. You don't open it just a little bit. You just lift the lid just a tiny bit and boom, everything comes out. Well, when everything comes out, it's going to blow the lid off of everything because this is the biggest damn story in human history. And it's simply this: you're not alone and you have never been alone. And you have had, as I have learned over the years, an intimate interrelationship with advanced extraterrestrial intelligence from the beginning of human history. And one of the big secrets is that they don't want to even get close to is that your very existence was initiated and orchestrated by an advanced extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, how the hell are they going to tell you all of that? Ain't going to happen. I hate to tell Stephen that, you know, I love you guys, but forget it. It ain't happening. Now, let me tell you what is happening. Disclosure has been taking place. It's known as controlled leakage. Funny term. It's amazing there's not puddles on the floor here because this conference, there's a lot of real leaking going on at this conference. And there is a stain there. Somebody's been leaking already. It's been underway for some time, and I'm going to tell you, it is what is known among the experts back there, wherever the hell back there is. It's a form of subliminal education. Now, there's not a one of you who is not aware of that, I'm sure. One of the great leakers of all time is another Stephen, not Bassett and not Greer, a Hollywood producer by the name of Spielberg, who has had some major contributions in this leaking going on over the years. He made a movie called E.T., which was primarily for the kids. He made another movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was primarily focused on you big kids. He also made a TV series, which I hope all of you saw, and they ought to release it again, called Taken. Now that's leakage in a big way. That's subliminal education in a big way. And Spielberg's not the only one. It's going on all the time, subtly, gently. The whole point of it is to be subtle, undercover, subliminal. I was honored a number of years ago to be a speaker at the Mensa Regional Conference in Orange County, Southern California. And I was honored being invited to speak at the Mensa Conference. I used to belong to the organization, but I've gotten away from it. It was too much like tooting your own horn. Anyhow, one of the speakers, the guest of honor at this Mensa Conference, was a guy by the name of Chris Carter. And as you may remember, Chris was the producer of The X-Files, which I think ran, 8 years? Sometime, a very popular show. People sort of knowingly grabbed at something like The X-Files because they knew they were going to get some pretty good stuff there. They're going to get some straight poop, as we used to say in the Army. And I talked to Carter, I got him aside, we were having drinks. And I said, Chris, fess up to me. Some of the shows you guys put on amaze me because, I've been in the government for years. I spent 30 years almost in the Army, another 14 years working with FEMA. I had top secret clearance most all of my careers. I've been in high places and I've learned things. So much of the stuff that you guys are showing on the X-Files is right out of the playbook. Now, where the hell are you getting this information? Who's feeding this to you? Now, a lot of your shows aren't worth a damn. Some of them I can't put, But there are a few in this X-Files series that they ran for some years that are right on. And he got a big grin on his face, and he looked around, and he says, "You ain't seen nothing yet." And he said, "Yes, we've been getting some storylines from a few people. I can't go into it, who they are and where they're from, but yes, my writers have been encouraged and assisted over the years with some storylines." And he says, "We've been most gratified at the people's response to these storylines." And there was one in particular that I nailed him with, and I said, that event happened. I happen to know the guys who were there. It involved Mulder cutting the wire of an Air Force base somewhere in California and sneaking into this Air Force base. And he gets no more than 30, 40 paces, and then this triangular object comes down the runway off the ground, 40, 50 feet up, pulls over, hovers over Mulder, and beams a spotlight on him. And then he hears the sirens, and then this bunch of police come out on the thing, and they grasp him and grapple him to the ground and haul him off into the inner sanctum somewhere. And then somebody sticks a needle into him, and Mulder becomes, half drunk with that. And then they finally release him. And when, what was her name? Scully, thank you. When Scully finally gets Mulder back, he's all groggy, and he really can't remember too clearly what's happened, where he's been, and what happened. Well, that whole damned event actually took place. And so help me, you see it on the X-Files, and I nailed him with that. And as I said, he was subtle. He had a big grin. He knew damn well what I was talking about. And he said, all they said, he says, "Yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet. Stay tuned." And I think the X-Files went on for another 2 or 3 years after that. And I enjoyed the show. As I said, some other programs were not that damn good, but some of them were right on. And it's part of this leakage, this subtle, subliminal education. Well, the people in this room, in my view, are about 10 miles ahead of most everybody else out there. But as Carter told me, stay tuned. You ain't seen nothing yet. So pay attention. I'm sure most of you do, or you wouldn't be here. You're getting this information slowly, carefully, subtly, subliminally. I can't even pronounce that. I got some water here. Every time I talk about sensitive material, I get, my mouth comes a little bit dry. Because I plan to share with you this afternoon, in the time we have, a couple of things that are rather sensitive. Okay, let's just jump around a bit. An event took place in California in 1954 at an Air Force base known as Muroc. This event had been planned and orchestrated by sensitive military, primarily naval individuals. And what it was essentially is that Eisenhower got aboard his plane, went out to this Muroc Air Force Base with a whole passel of guys from his administration, and including the Archbishop or Cardinal or Bishop of Los Angeles, a guy by the name of McIntyre. And this thing had been orchestrated and organized for some time because there had been communications between individuals in naval intelligence. And I say naval, and I say this again and again and again. My kid retired as a senior officer from the Navy just in November. The Navy has been up to here, this whole program from the very beginning, and they actually run the operation over at Groom Lake at S4, Site 51, which you've all heard about. We'll see more about here. There's more leakage going on tomorrow, believe me. And there are some big leakers coming here. Pay attention. Anyhow, this event took place. I've had verification and proof that it actually transpired from sources that impeccable. They flew Ike out there. Supposedly he was visiting a dentist. He had a problem. Well, bless his heart, he really did have a problem. When this was over, he ended up having a coronary. That impact upon him was so powerful that he ended up having a heart attack. Anyhow, what transpired in April 1954? A group of others, I hate the word alien, I don't even like the word ETs, but whatever term you care to use, they came in. There were 3 ships. They were golden in color. They were discs primarily, circular discs, but they were fat discs. They had a high dome on the top and they had a big dome on the bottom. And these golden metallic discs came in, 3 of them, and they circled over the runway, made several passes. And Ike and this whole crowd are standing there with, mouths dropping open. We had some generals, we had some admirals, and we had a couple of church authorities there, and poor old Ike. And these guys circled around for a time, and then one of the ships came in and landed on the tarmac right in front of the hangar where the receiving party, the welcoming party, was located. And they had cameras set up. There were at least 4, maybe 5 cameras. Everything was on film. All of the sounds, they picked up every word that was said. One of the ships come over and lands right in front of the hangar. The other 2 ships stayed hovering over the runway during the entire process. The stories I've heard from people I trust in that the whole thing went 3 days. There was a lot of exchange, and your country hasn't been the same since. You talk about black government, shadow government. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea how damn black it is. The government you think you've got is not the government you've got. The government you think you had, the government that Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, all the rest of those guys created 200 years ago, is not the government you've got today. You do not have a democratic republic, good people, and I'm sorry to have to tell you that. Your democratic republic ceased to exist. I think the last chink in the thing was probably in 1913, when they created that financial nightmare that they created. They created a financial nightmare in 1913 that's caused, I think, contributed in great extent, the problem we find ourselves economically in today. The Federal Reserve was created at midnight in Congress a couple of days before Christmas in 1913, and your beautiful republic breathed its last. That was the beginning of it. The last gasps of your republic took place in 1947. And if you think that wasn't a big year, you all know about Roswell. Well, let me tell you, Roswell was one little tiny event. For God's sake, there were 3 crashes in that area in New Mexico within 30 days. Roswell was only a tiny piece of it. There have been crashes going on all over the country and all around the world for the last 40 years, 60 years. We've been picking up bits and pieces of hardware all over the damn planet. The Navy retrieved a UFO out of the waters off San Diego in 1941. And if you talk about parts, well, we picked up bits and pieces. Ooh, and we loaded them up. We took them off here and we took them off there. Took them at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We've taken them at several places. And then, God bless them, we've taken the bodies and a couple of survivors off as well. Well, that's ancient history. But I'm saying, forgive me if I repeat myself, your government that you thought you had ceased to exist in 1947. And 1947 was also a year where we created the Central Intelligence Agency, we created the National Security Organization, and we also signed a pact called the UKUSA Pact, UK-USA. Now this pact we signed in 1947 was not just an accident. At the end of World War II, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States signed this pact, and we have been like this ever since. But the people in the United Kingdom, in England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, they don't know any more about it in reality than most people out there do. Because one of the things about the UKUSA Pact was the lid came down on all the secrets, particularly the secrets of their reality, and the lid has been down ever since. I have to laugh sometimes when I hear Nick Pope speaking out. Many of you know who Nick Pope is. He's a delightful young man. He's a bright young man. He worked for the Ministry of Defense in Britain for a number of years, and he had the UFO desk. And Nick is a lot like some of our people. They sit at the desk and they see a little bit, but they don't see most of it, because most of it never got to Nick's desk. So when he tells you that everything's been released, we're releasing it all over the place. Oh yeah, France has been releasing their classified material. The United Kingdom has been releasing their classified material, and the US has begun releasing little bits and pieces of it. If you think they're releasing anything of real importance, forget it. The stuff that they're releasing is garbage. Nick, forgive me, wherever you are at this moment. I'm not putting you down. Most of the stuff they're releasing is garbage. The only bit of information that came out of France recently that was of any information or of any value was a report they called the Cometa report. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with that. A number of retired French admirals and generals and scientists got together and put together a 30 or 40 page document called the Cometa report about what they considered to be the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, which is a term I like to repeat from time to time, the UFO matter. And the Cometa report said essentially that, damn it, we're not being told the truth, and we think it's time for everybody to fess up and get this information out. And the French were really ticked because, you know, they've had a chip on their shoulder from the very beginning that they've never really been shared with by the United Kingdom and the United States. That was one of the big problems when I was in Paris in 1963 to 67, when old de Gaulle threw us out. He withdrew from the military alliance, which I was a part of at that time. He stayed a member of NATO, but he withdrew from the alliance because he was pissed off because the British and the Americans had not taken him into their confidence and shared with him. Well, the French admirals and generals even today are angry because the United Kingdom and the Americans have not shared with France. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Because when I was there in Paris in 1963 to 67, there was a major French spy ring going on at the time, where everything that Washington and London would send to us at SHAPE headquarters went immediately to Moscow. So Washington was not sending anything to SHAPE headquarters about the UFO matter, where these things were flying all over Central Europe back then. Gordon Cooper admitted to me, he said, you know, I was flying jet fighters over Europe in the 50s, and they were all over the damn place. We wondered then what they were all about. Well, bless his heart, Gordon now knows the answer. Oh, where were we? I was rambling, excuse me. We were talking about disclosure. There are lots of different things that have been happening. Let me get to some of this material here. One of the things that ticked me off the most is a little document known as executive order. I have in my fingers, I sound like one of those guys on TV. I have in my greasy fingers here an executive order. Copy of it. This was signed by Slick Willie. President Clinton. Slick Willie signed this on September the 29th, 1995. An executive order is something that you may not be aware of. An executive order is probably the most powerful piece of paper there is in our government. A president sits down, comes up with an idea, he has something he wants to do, he puts it on paper, he signs it, that becomes law. Nobody in Congress has to talk about it, nobody in Congress is asked to see it, nobody in Congress has to give approval to this, because when the president signs it, it becomes law. Now that in itself, good God, Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, those guys are spinning in their graves, I think. The fact that we've reached this point where an imperial president can sit in his office at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and sign an executive order which becomes the law of the land, and you cannot argue with it. This particular one that Clinton signed in September of '95 wiped away every rule in the Environmental Protection Act. There were a bunch of guys over here, not too far away, at Groom Lake, Site 51, who were dying horrible deaths because they had been exposed to something, smoke, chemical, whatever, during their job. And these guys, the flesh was falling off their bodies. Their skin was rupturing, the flesh was falling. They were in incredible pain, and they were dying. And their doctors and some attorneys tried to find out what it was that was causing this. If the doctors could find out what was causing it, they could possibly help those guys deal with this, and they could come up with some way of treating them. Well, not only did the government deny the request for information on what that material was that was killing these guys, those bastards in Washington even denied the damn facility didn't even exist. And this is after the Soviets had taken photographs from orbit proving the existence of Groom Lake and Site 51. And the Soviets were good enough to let us have photographs of the damn place. And yet your government in Washington says, oh, that doesn't exist. That place doesn't exist. No. And they wouldn't share any information, and those guys continued to die. I don't know how many of them passed away. I've lost track of it over the years. But I want you to know something about your government, or what the government you think you've got. There's another tiny tidbit here. I got a stack of tidbits I hope to share with you. How many of you are aware that your national, what do we call it here? The National Patent Office has a whole set of orders called secrecy orders. You know, patents are guys that invent something, scientists. We got some smart guys out there. They invent something. You all probably know that we have had inventions that, oh God, I tend to get angry here. Every time I go to the filling station, I'm angry when I put gas in my car. We've had free energy for over 40 years. But that's a separate story. The National Patent Office, guys who invent something, come up with bright ideas, a machine that you poke it, start it, it creates power, it gets more power coming out than was put in, and it, oh my God, already? Oh geez. I'm sorry. It's a problem I've had. As I said, I have this pile of stuff I wanted to share, and I only got 15 minutes. Well, I wanted to throw this out to you. The last bit of information I have is in the year 2002. There were 4,792 patents that had a secrecy stamp placed upon them, where those patents could not be talked about, published, or developed because they involved national security. That was in 2002. 4,792 secrecy orders were in effect at the end of that year. There were 139 patent applications during the fiscal year 2002 where the secrecy order was placed on them and publication of their findings was denied. Why? National security. So, as I said, we've had free energy for years. Let me tell you one other small thing. A retired scientist by the name of David Froning, who is alive and well and living outside of Flagstaff, Arizona today. 15 years ago, David Froning spoke at a conference which I was part of. And Froning graduated or completed his career working for Lockheed Martin, this vast corporation that's got their sticky fingers in so damn many things. David told us at this conference 15 years ago that before he retired, Lockheed Martin had, how the word he is, they had developed and were using hyperluminal flight. And it took some of us a little bit of a side there, and David, hyperluminal flight. Yeah, he said, faster than light. They've had it 40 years. Who has it? Well, he says, I want to say your government, but I can't say that with all honesty because he says it's classified. We've had hyperluminal flight for years, and you may know about it in another 20, 30 years when they fess up and tell you that what they can do, and what they've accomplished, and what they can do, and what they have done. Now, another little tiny tidbit. This was from David Froning, a respected man, a scientist who spent all those years. Froning was involved with what he called modified field propulsion, a variable field form of propulsion. They were dealing with matter-antimatter conversion. They called it exotic field tension. And he said flatly, it modifies time and space. And it ends up, we've got luminal, hyperluminal flight. Now, some years ago, a guy by the name of Ben Rich retired from Lockheed Martin. And in the end of his career, Ben ran the skunk works over there at Lockheed. And there was a little jovial exchange between him and the guys in the audience out there. And Ben Rich said, you know, we can take E.T. home. I think the E.T. movie was out about that time. He says, we can take E.T. home. And a few of the guys in the audience says, Ben, what the hell are you talking about? Oh, he said, let me tell you, we've got stuff you wouldn't believe. We can take extraterrestrial home. So they said, look, what the hell is it all about? He goes over to the blackboard and he writes, unfunded opportunities. Okay. Well, the guys say, well, what the hell does that mean, Ben? Unfunded opportunities. So he goes over with the chalk and he circles the U and the F and the O.
Could you say that again louder, please? Could you say it louder again, please?
This term that he wrote on the blackboard was unfunded opportunities, and he circles the U of unfunded and the F in unfunded and the O in opportunities. UFO. And then he had a big grin on his face and he left the podium. So we got these little bits and pieces. You talk about leakage. Leakage, oh, it's all over the place. Just one little other piece of leakage here. Many of you probably know this. Jesus, I got so much to share here. Oh, John Glenn, who you all know, I'm sure, know who he is. He appeared on the Frasier TV show. It's one of my favorite shows. Some years back, in March of 2001. Now this was, I'm sure, planned and orchestrated. This was not an accident. In the process of that Frasier show, John Glenn said, back in those glory days, I was very uncomfortable when they asked us to say things that we didn't want to say and deny other things. Some people ask, you know, were you alone out there? We never gave the real answer. We've seen things out there, strange things, but we know what we saw out there and we couldn't really say anything about it. The bosses were scared of this. They were afraid of the War of the Worlds type stuff, about panic in the streets. And so we had to keep quiet, and now we only see these things in our nightmares or maybe in the movies, and some of them are pretty close to being the truth. You talk about leakage? That was not an accident. That was a form of leakage. That was a form of, what do they call it? Subtle education. Anyhow, where the hell am I? Something else I had to get to. Important. Before he died, John Paul II was negotiating. Oh my. They tell me I have 5 minutes. I'm going to ask for maybe 5 more, maybe, if these people are agreeable. John Paul II, before he died, was negotiating with the government of Iraq. There was a nitwit running the government of Iraq at that time by the name of Saddam Hussein. Well, the Vatican was negotiating with Saddam Hussein because the Pope, bless his heart, he wanted to make a pilgrimage to the holy city of in Iraq. Now, there's nothing at today but the ruins of a ziggurat. But it was one of the major cities of the old ancient Sumerian civilization that was established by the group we jokingly refer to as the Anunnaki. Now, why was it that John Paul wanted to make a pilgrimage to the holy city of in Iraq? Well, it was because after the events in April of 1954, Cardinal McIntyre, once it was all over with, scurried off to New York, got himself aboard an airplane, flew off to the Vatican, and spilled the beans to the Pope about what had transpired there at that Air Force base in the desert, California. And the Vatican, my friends, have been up to here in this whole cover-up, in this whole matter, from the very beginning. As I jokingly refer, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, if you might be Roman Catholic, I have respect for you. But it's a strange city. It's a national state of its own on the banks of the Tiber in Rome, filled with old men wearing long dresses and funny hats. Some of my Catholic friends are going to get me for that. The Vatican has been up to its eyeballs in this whole cover-up from the very beginning. They have one of the finest national security intelligence operations on the planet. I mean, a retired Soviet KGB general by the name of Oleg Kalugin, who is now living in Washington, D.C., and he's an advisor and some of our people in government. Oleg Kalugin said, if we had had the intelligence operations in the Soviet Union as good as the one at the Vatican, the Cold War would still be going on. The Berlin Wall would have not fallen, and the Soviet Union would still exist. He says, we always knew that the best damn security intelligence operation on the planet was out of the Vatican. And probably the reason is that every damn priest in every country on the planet, Catholic priest, is in a sense an agent of the Vatican Intelligence Secret Service. And they're deeply concerned about the location and the appearance in our solar system of a planet known as Nibiru, which has already been photographed, and I have a picture of it here in a moment to share with you. The 10th planet has been photographed by an what do they call them, where the telescopes are?
Astronomers.
Well, anyhow, they've taken pictures of the damn thing in southern Chile because it has appeared below the ecliptic in the southern hemisphere. It's already been photographed by at least 3 cameras and telescopes. And you're all going to be seeing it probably in the northern skies in the next 3 to 5 years. It's one of the biggest secrets in our government today. The reality and the presence of the 10th planet. Our government has known about it since 1980. Anyhow, it's real, it's there, and we're going to see it up here. It's classified at the moment. Sorry, I can't tell you that. I'm running out of time, guys. I'm sorry. I really apologize. That's so damn much. Look, I'm going to be here all week. I got a few slides to share with you. No, my slideshow, I'm an old-fashioned old fart. I brought a tray of slides. They can't handle them back there. Because my old-fashioned, you know. So I do have some transparencies which I want to show you real quickly, including the picture of Nibiru, which was sent to me by a friend in Rome who has a connection with the Vatican Secret Service like this. You're living in a hell of a time. You think it's exciting. You read the stock reports. You see what the economy is in a disaster. You read the garbage that's going on in the Middle East. All of this. I'm hearing sounds. Bells are ringing, you know. That's the first sign, I guess, that maybe my time is up. Anyhow, I have so much that I haven't even got close to. I touched base on just a few things this afternoon, things that I feel were important. I wanted you to know that you're living in an incredible time, which you orchestrated yourselves. There's not a one of you who didn't plan your incarnation here. And your being here in the flesh is no accident. But let's get to some of these transparencies, please. Mel, would you throw the first one up? I've been friends and close relations with a retired NASA scientist by the name of Norman Berggren. Norman has written a beautiful book called The Ringmakers of Saturn. Norman is retired NASA. Spent almost 30 years working for NASA. He wrote this book about 10 or 15 years ago, and he included in it a number of photographs taken by the Voyager mission back, I think, 23 years ago. Keep that cover up there, that number 1. There. That object photographed by Voyager in the rings of Saturn is about the size of our moon, and it is a self-luminous object that moves around. The size of our moon. Self-luminous. It moves all over the damn place. Voyager photographed it near the rings of Saturn. God bless him, Norman was a hero for publishing this. Put up the next one, please. Oh yeah, what you see on the right is a ring of Saturn. What you see on the left are two objects. The one in the upper left-hand corner there is another self-luminous object that moves all over the place. And then the one you see, this long thing here at the end of that ring, Norman Berggren says he believed that they were making the rings. I'm convinced that they were probably mining the rings. But I respect Norman's opinion. He's the retired NASA scientist, and he did the book. And that object at the end of that is over 2,000 miles long. It is an artificially constructed object, over 2,000 miles long. It's about 500 miles in diameter. Now, you remember what was the famous British writer that just died? Arthur Clarke, thank you. I have these moments, you know, where I think they call it senior moments where you forget. Arthur Clarke used to say, if you see advanced technology to a degree that's beyond what you can understand, people consider it as magic. Well, this is magic, guys. Throw the next one up. That object, can you imagine a technology and a society that can build an object 2,000 miles long, for 500 miles in diameter, that could either be mining or making the rings of Saturn? Oh, this is an object that flew up and knocked the Soviet satellite out of orbit some years ago. The Soviets sent up damn first-rate satellite over to orbit Mars. And they wanted to take pictures of one of the moons. They wanted to take pictures of Phobos, one of the 2 moons of Mars. And while they were taking pictures, this object comes up from the surface of Mars, bumps the Soviet Phobos satellite, knocks it out of orbit, and it crashes. Next picture, please. Oh, this is a city on Mars. This was photographed in the infrared, and this is a city under the surface of Mars the size of Chicago. It's generating an enormous amount of heat. The heat was picked up by the photograph. I'm sorry about the details of it are not that clear, but you can see the streets blocks. This is an underground city on Mars that's fully active and filled with God knows who and what. Next picture, please. There it is again. Could you move that somewhat so the bottom part of that comes up a little closer? Guys? Yes, thank you. What you see there is a picture of Phobos, the moon, and I mean artificial moon of Mars, and below it you see an object that the Soviets said measured roughly 15 kilometers in length. An artificial object near Phobos, the moon, 15 kilometers in length. Next picture, please. That's Phobos. That's the moon, 12 miles in diameter. The Soviets planned to land on it. Well, someone else said, no, you're not going to do that. But that is a picture of Phobos, which they've all concluded is an artificial satellite. Big secret, so's our own. Next picture. This photograph was taken by your own NASA Apollo 13 guys on their trip to the moon. It didn't work out too well. And many of you may have heard rumors about the story, but Apollo 13 had a small nuclear device aboard. And they had been told by the guys that ran NASA that they were going to land on the surface, going to place this small nuclear device. And then when they all left and came back aboard and came back, they were going to detonate it and study the reverberations of this nuclear device, study the seismology of the moon, because they've been convinced for some years that the moon is basically hollow. It appears to be somewhat of an artificial satellite. Well, they plan to detonate this nuclear device, and the others said, no, you're not going to do that. We'll get back to that picture again, please. All right, I wanted to show you. This picture was taken by Apollo 13. The object you see there in the middle is 5 miles long. It's an artificial, I assume metallic object, probably crammed with guys. And that object followed our Apollo 13 all the way to the moon, around and back. Now, whether they were trying to make sure the Apollo 13 guys got home safely or what, whether they were the ones responsible for Apollo 13's little accident, which kept them from landing on the moon and placing that nuclear device, who knows? We may find out someday. But here you have an artificial object in orbit on the way to the moon, 5 miles long. Now, I've spent some time aboard aircraft carriers with my kid. I've been invited several times. My boy served on 4 different carriers, nuclear-powered Nimitz-class carriers. We have carriers with 5,000 men in the crew, 1,000 feet long, 150 aircraft, there's snack bars, dining rooms, accommodations, this and that. Can you imagine the accommodations on a object? I like to think that, there's McDonald's, bowling alleys, God knows what. I'm sure they have a fairly good life out there. Anyhow, aboard an object 5 miles long. Next slide. Let's move along here. Next one, please. The second photograph. Same objects, but a second photo in the sequence. Apollo 13. That's the big mother, and I use that, no pun intended. There are other objects out there. There's a disc-shaped object, and then there's the other object. Then above it is the moon out there. But there's that one big object out there. I'm sure they got a crew of hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand. In 5 miles, you can put a lot of, good stuff out there. We know this about them. Next slide. We know that they're almost like us. They're very much like us. Oh God, listen, guys, we're going to have to stop. Take it down, please. Turn the thing off. I'm out of time. I've tried, in the time I had, to do two things. To impress upon you the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, the ones I refer to as the others. I hate the term alien. I hate the term UFO. There are no UFOs. We've known what they are for years and years and years. Some of them are ours, some of them are theirs. There's no unidentified flying objects out there. They're all identified. I've tried to impress upon you the seriousness of it, the seriousness of the cover-up and the lies they've been telling you, the importance of why you need to know as much as you can know. And you need to be presented with the material because, damn it, you all deserve the truth. You have a right to know and you have a need to know because you are the people that this whole damn thing is all about. Now, they're in our midst. Yeah, that's an understatement. When I came in, I arrived yesterday. I've been running around here all day. There's an old friend sitting in the audience out here who I've known for years. He's currently with Defense Intelligence Agency. He's getting up to years, probably going to retire very soon. And I've met him many times. We've shared a lot of information. There is another young man in the audience here who I will not point to because I can't see a damn thing with those lights, who is from National Security Agency, and he and my old friend were not aware of the other one being present here. But the one that's most redeeming and most exciting for me is there is a couple here who look like they're in the mid-40s. They look like a husband and wife. Nice looking people. Very nicely appearance. As I said, their appearance is like a husband and wife. They're sitting together. Neither one of them were born on this planet. Guys, they're in your midst. If you have dinner down here somewhere, you could be. If you have dinner down here somewhere, you could be sitting next to one of them. There are two of them in the audience this afternoon, and I want to salute you. They're nice folks. They're as human in most respects as you and I are. They're all over the damn place. They're in our midst, and they are family. We're related to them because they were the ones that had a hand in establishing us as a hybrid race 100,000 years ago. And that hybridization is still underway, it's still happening, even as we sit here and speak. It hasn't stopped. It's underway. There are lots of guys here from different places. They have different agendas. Some of them are nice folks and some of them are not. As I said, they have different agendas. But we're not in any great fear because the nice folks are going to damn well insist and ensure that we are allowed to keep this program underway and that we're going to survive and keep this beautiful, blessed little planet going the way it's been going. We're making some progress. But they're all around. And you should, I think, feel a sense of gratitude and satisfaction to know that some of them are good folks, nice folks, and they care about you. And then the other thing I want to say is I learned there is a God, and that each and every one of you is an immortal soul who will live forever. And you've been here before, and you probably will come back again. And if you don't incarnate here again on this particular planet, maybe we can meet each other and our paths will cross if we reincarnate somewhere else, because this program is a universal program in scope. And it's never ending, and it's something absolutely glorious to find out when you realize the truth of that. Now, I'm sorry, I apologize. I rambled too much, I'm long-winded. I want to say something in closing. I want to try to communicate to you how much you people have meant to me over the years.
Can't hear you.
I want you to know how much you all have meant to me over the years. Your support, your encouragement, and your warmth is only the one thing that's kept me going. I want you to know, how grateful I am to each and every one of you. You are friends. Ti amo. I love you all. Good night.